Now we're going to show you how to remove the fuel pump, install the hanger, and then reinstall it. And our resident expert here, Lance, will walk you through it.
Because Brian has already removed the seat to run the wiring for the fuel pump hardware, we are going to remove the fuel pump inspection plate that is on most Subarus to get access to the fuel pump module. So it is not necessarily important, but it's, if you can, try to salvage the gasket and remove this slowly so it doesn't tear it, just to kind of keep from water and other things, everything sealed up nice and properly. So you have, right now, we have access to the fuel pump. You've got the pressure lines, the evap lines. You got to remove all of those to remove the pump assembly out. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, one super important note is these are 8mm nuts, and you have to be super careful with that, because if you over torque them, they will bust off, and then you have to replace the whole gas tank. They're all integrated. There's no fixing it. The other thing that's super helpful, if you use a 1/4-inch ratchet, you're going to kind of naturally control how much torque you give on it. So just a little helpful tip. Okay, so now that we've got everything undone and the lines disconnected, you got to be careful with this stuff. You get just slowly pull back against it so that you don't break these lines. They're all made of plastic. And then nicely just kind of move everything out of the way. There is room, and then you can remove the mounting bracket. Okay. So the bracket comes out. Always be gentle with this stuff. Okay. And then
it's actually really cool. I've never seen inside a gas tank before.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
You're not missing much. It's stinky.
No, I know.
It's stinky. All right, now that we have the module out, we're going to separate it to get access to the pump itself. So what you have to do is pop these tabs off very carefully and slide this housing out. Keep in mind you also have to remove this fuel sender. Like that. This is where it gets a little tricky. This right here is the pump. This is also the screen. It's very important that you replace the screen when you replace the pump. Now that we've separated the cover and gotten access to the pump, we're going to take it to the table and show you how to do the rest. So the next part, we're going to separate the hanger from the pump module And how we do that is actually push the hanger down, and you'll see this retainer clip right here. You just get a little screwdriver and pop it off. You got to make sure to put tension on this because they are spring loaded, but not too much to break it, because they do break. Just like that. Okay, and then before you release it up all the way, you're going to want to make sure that any connectors that may be attached to the top part of the hanger will come off properly. So what we'll do on this specific is disconnect these. And again, this is the fuel level sender and then the fuel pump. Let's see. This one. And then don't fight it, just let it naturally want to come off. Let's see. Ugh, it's one of those ones. Okay.
Nice hands.
All right, now that we have separated it, what we're going to do is get access to the pump here. It actually slides in and locks into the factory housing. This is a little bit trickier. There's two tabs right in here. You gotta carefully release it, and then you can remove the pump. I'm just letting you know right now, I've hardly gotten it the first time. Hardly ever gotten it the first time.
You're gonna get it on the first try. The first ready.
So a smaller screwdriver might be better.
Yeah. You can see inside here what I'm trying to do is these tabs, pry them out without breaking them so that the pump will drop down. Just like that. And then this last piece is the screen. There's a little, what'd you call it, like a lock ring?
C-clip?
It's not a C-clip, it's like a lock ring.
I mean, do you need to take that off? Does
Yes.
it come with a freshie?
Yes, it does.
That's what he has to take off to put that on.
But I'm showing them like what it, you know what I mean? Because they're gonna need to see it separate. Or maybe not, I don't know.
I was gonna say, if they're just gonna put a new one on, I don't think it
Like
matters
that.
that much. But
And then,
yeah, just to compare.
this will go in the new one, but we'll talk about that in a minute. What we're going to do with this specific one is we're going to put in the AEM 340 into the OEM hanger and basket. All right, now that we have separated the pump from the hanger and the basket, we have to pull out this old OEM O-ring. See that inside there? And we're going to replace it with a new one. The other important thing is that you take off, some OEM pumps have shims to kind of help put pressure against the O-ring inside the basket. You want to switch that over to the new pump. Okay, so push that. Pull it out like that. Always replace the O-rings with new O-rings. So like that. And then always use grease on the O-rings so it goes in smoothly and doesn't damage anything. Then it's just gonna pop into place like the other one did. Just like that. You can see the lock tabs are popped in as well. Okay, now once you have it locked into place, remove this dust cap.
Remove the child safety lock.
Yeah. And then always use a new sock or screen, whatever you want to call it. Always use a new one. I would also note that in a lot of cases, make sure you get the right sock for your vehicle. Not all socks will necessarily fit the baskets, and the hanger is the same. All right. This is a retainer. All right, now that we've got the pump snapped in to the basket, before we reassemble it, we need to put in the wire, and Brian's gonna show you how that's done. Now that the wiring's all done, we're ready to reassemble the pump module. So, replace the O-rings. Now there's a few different O-rings that you need to be concerned about. This one inside here, okay? And then there's two right here as well. If possible, replace them, but also make sure you lubricate the O-rings so that everything goes in smoothly without damaging the O-rings. Okay, now reinstall these springs. Okay. Okay. Let's load this in. Now, be careful with these plastic lines. Do not fight them. Do not force them. They will snap and break, and if that's the case, you will have to replace the fuel pump module, and they are several $100s. So just make sure you're careful. Don't fight it. Okay, now that we have the rods all the way through, you'll see that one has a retainer clip. Just gonna pop that back into place. And then, like that. Okay, and then you're going to pop the lines back on. This one sucks. Sorry. Okay. Just like that.
So you need a fan to get that connector in?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
All right. Now, as a rule of thumb, you want to make sure that everything sits within this parameter because it's going to move. You don't want it to bind or pinch or kink, so you want to make sure that everything, is clear of itself. And then you grease that little O-ring inside there.
Oh, sorry, before you put it. And that includes the harness. See how we kind of coiled it up?
Yes.
It's almost like a spring. So that way it's got plenty of room to compress inside itself. When you push the harness in, it's not going to hurt anything.
Okay. Then, sure. Put some grease on this O-ring. Slide it in. And then, carefully, sorry.
Okay.
I just didn't like how it was sitting. Okay, that's good. And then, last piece, the fuel level sender. Let's see here. That. Then make sure it's not going to contact, and she's all ready to go back in the car. Alright, now that we've done all the prep work and the hard work of wiring everything up, putting in the new pump, we're going to put it back in the vehicle. Same steps as before when taking it off. Just make sure that you clear the fuel level sender. What happens more often than not is when people put it in and it gets caught on the sender, they'll notice the fuel gauge doesn't work. That's when you know something didn't go right. So go ahead and slide it back in like before. Okay. Let's see. Okay.
It's on the connector.
Was that?
It was on the connector.
Oh.
I think it was already.
Now I will let you know these things only fit one way and the gaskets only fit one way, so make sure to pay attention when putting it back together.
Good so far. Well, don't need any back seats if you don't have any friends.
So Lance has got it installed for us. Definitely take your time here. It's not worth messing up all the hard work you've done up to this point to rush here. So now that we have it on there,
Oh, fake tightening.
oh, and then tighten, hand tight, but a little bit more, just snug, nothing crazy. Perfect. All right. Now Lance has done all the hard work and gotten the fuel pumps out, or fuel pump out. We like to talk about the different types of fuel pumps. So this is your stock one. This is AM340. This is probably going to be your most common pump upgrade for majority of applications. If you need more fuel than that, there's a Walbro 450. I think it's also commonly known as a 45, depending on the type. There's also a 525. We generally don't recommend 525. There's a whole bunch on that. Mostly has to do with the fact that it tends to destroy fuel pump controllers, and it seems to have some internal faults that cause that. We have a blog post on that, so definitely check that out for a whole detail on 525s, fuel pump controllers, and all the stuff relating to that. Outside of that, if you need more than 450 liters per hour, we generally recommend 2 pumps, either 2 340s or 2 450s. Depends on your application. Radium makes an amazing hanger for that, and we also have a plug-and-play kit for that. The install would be the exact same as this. There's just a slight tweak to it because you're adding the secondary pump, of which on our install guides on the website has all the details for that.
One of the analogies that Brian often talks about when he's talking about pumps, it's like when you're trying to push a car, it's stalled. If you have 2 people pushing a car, it's a lot easier than 1 big person pushing a car. So what we like to suggest, especially with the higher horsepower vehicles, is using a dual pump system. That way you're not straining 1 pump working hard, you're getting 2 of them to work, comfortably.
I would say the last piece about the 2 pump is that with 525, remember that every time you start the car, the ECU requests 100% fuel for about 15 seconds, and it's really hard for the ECU to compensate for that much fuel, especially when you have 450 and 525. Now, if you want to run a 525, there's even more fuel in that scenario. But if you ran 2 340s in a hanger, the primary pump will be running at full blast, not 2, because the secondary pump will be based on a manifold pressure switch. So it would only come on when you hit 10 pounds of boost, or depending on what your tuner's setting up for. So you don't have those high fuel pressure issues when you don't need the fuel. So we should probably explain as to why you need the stud bypass kit. The biggest reason is the stock connector. So if you look here, stock connector is basic small terminals. The gauge is not that large, and then it goes from a connector to a connector. So each time you go through connector is a resistance point. And if you look at the way that the stock connector is set up, it's actually a 90-degree turn. It'd be like kinking a hose. Electrical current doesn't like any of these things. So what ends up happening, even on factory setups, is if you run low on fuel and the pump gets hot, these connectors will burn out. So if you're going to upgrade your pump, now you have even more concern about that, because now you're pushing past what the original terminals were even designed for. So the stud bypass kit fixes that. And as we mentioned before, one of the biggest reasons for fuel pump controller failure is when this burns out, generally power and ground's short, and that fries your controller. So this allows you to use a stock controller for a much larger size pump than we would have thought originally.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Now that we have, sorry, hold on.
Outtakes. Okay, hold on.
Newtoners. It's in fig newtons.
Fig newtons.
You guys, I have to use the audio. You can't talk the whole time.
35 fig newtons.